And our top story as we start things off will be President Trump upping the ante when it comes to China. And Apple, fearful maybe it gets caught in the crosshairs of all of that. The president telling Apple it can avoid higher prices if it makes its products in the U.S. and not China. We're going to talk about how all this adds up, or maybe doesn't add up. From the Wall Street Journal, editorial board member Bill McGurn is here. Radio talk show host Ben Kissel is here. And from Payne Capital Management, senior wealth advisor Michelle McKinnon is also here. So terrific panel to start off here on a Monday. Welcome all. Bill, do you want to get us going on this idea? It was one of the president's tweets over the weekend about Apple and this whole idea that if you're in a zero tariff world, right, and Apple can make its iPhone here in the United States, the analysis I've seen is that no matter what the tariff is, it's still going to cost more if it's made in the USA.
Look, I think there's two Donald Trumps on trade. The one I like with Europe is the one that says we put zero tariffs on your products, your cars, and you put zero tariffs on our cars. But the one we've been seeing with NAFTA and now China is either managed trade, we're going to create the incentives or change the incentives to force people to build it at home and be a lot more expensive. I have 3 daughters and a wife who love their iPhones.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at a hefty increase. Look, the whole premise of trade is that you can capitalize on some people doing things cheaper than you can. And labor is not the only component. You know,
no.
A lot of the wealth of an Apple or an iPhone is this very complicated supply chain of parts that all comes together into what's an iPhone. When I was in Asia, the big scandal was over a Nike shoe, which is pretty much the same process. Shoelaces from Germany, rubber from Malaysia, and it's the process that's the value.
I'm glad you brought up the idea that labor is not, or low-cost labor is not the only issue, Michelle, because it's interesting to hear, say, Tim Cook talk about this, and he did in an interview, I don't know when it was, not that long ago, where he said, you know, the workers in China and their skills and the scalability of those skills, they have so many people who know how to do what they do. You can't get that here in the United States either. A lot of people don't get that part of it.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, Apple has a fiduciary responsibility to its shareholders to find the best way to make money. And so I don't think Apple's going to be swayed by a couple of tweets or a couple of one-off decisions in terms of what Trump's rhetoric is on the day. However, honestly, Connell, I don't see this escalating much further because I know there has been news of the EU, Japan, and the United States coming together and forming a coalition against China.
When you say this, you mean the quote-unquote trade war overall?
Yes. And if we loop in Mexico as well as Canada, that's almost 40% of China's exports. I think that's a lot of leverage that I think China's going to come back to the table and want to do a deal.
Is that you sighing loudly across the table?
I try to be optimistic.
I didn't know if I was the only one who heard that or not.
Come on.
In the middle of the interview.
There's a dying horse over on this section of the table. I mean, obviously, when it comes to China, the reason it's so cheap is multifaceted. On average, their employees make like $100 a week, much less than our employees would have to make here. And then when it comes to what actually, as you were talking about, what actually goes into the iPhone to make it an iPhone, the camera sensor, the OLED screen, all of those are products that are created in China, so we would have to have those shipped over here.
But I guess Michelle's larger point is that this whole, and this is kind of the market discussion, argument internally and externally, is that, you know, for all of this, maybe at the end of the day, it doesn't amount to that much, and it all gets wrapped up. It's all a negotiating tactic, all that kind of thing. Is that what you're?
Absolutely. I think this is very traditional Trump practices. This is rhetoric. This is how he does business, and I ultimately think we're going to get a better deal because of it.
A better deal overall. Bill, you optimistic?
I hope it works out this way. Look, one of the downsides that people don't talk about is, say iPhones were built here and say they cost money. That puts Apple at a competitive disadvantage with other phones made by Samsung or Nokia or whoever you are. So, you know, is that really the answer? I'm very much worried about managed trade, and people should want to come here because we offer low tax, low regulatory environment that's very attractive for capital. And when you try to tell companies where they should have their supply chain, I'm a little doubtful.
Well, Apple on the back of their iPhones for years has written something that maybe we want it to be this way, designed in California and made in China, and then all of that's probably done for a reason. Here's a topic that Ben he'll jump out, I'm sure, if we kind of broaden things out a little bit. The president, and you know, there have been many tweets. There have been tweets this morning, there were tweets over the weekend, but the president firing back at some of the critics that have come out, especially with the Woodward book release coming, I believe, tomorrow, saying that his White House is a smooth-running machine. You want to take that one up?
Donald Trump saying that his White House is a smooth running machine. To me, from the outside, it looks about as smooth as the train from Snowpiercer. It's a little bit bumpy, to say the least. Anytime your vice president vows to take a lie detector test to prove that he is not a leaker, of course, of the anonymous op-ed for the New York Times, it's never great. So there is, without a doubt, a chaos going on within the administration.
In an economy that's strong, in a lot of things that could be pointed to that are going well kind of externally, how much does that internal chaos bill matter if it's
I'm not sure it matters. I think it's a giant distraction. Look, I worked in a West Wing. There's always rivalries. I think people would say the Bush administration was a little more disciplined than most, not just than Donald Trump's. But I think we're focusing on this and not a 4% economy that we were told was not possible, and many of the other achievements that I like, getting out of the Paris Climate Agreement, all sorts of things.
Michelle?
Absolutely. I think we're missing the part of the deregulation, right? Just last year, Trump and his administration put in 67 new tactics to deregulate, and that's adding businesses the ability to cut costs of over $500 million per year from those deregulations. So, I mean, we're missing the picture. I agree.
I think go ahead, Ben, real quick.
But when it comes to the distraction, we're only talking about it because Donald Trump is tweeting about it. He's the one sort of creating the distraction, and it seems like this may have come. There's a lot of speculation.
Well, the book and the op-ed and all that.
They say the op-ed may have been written by someone in the national security wing. So for a lot of Americans, they're more concerned about national security than they are happy with the economy.
Well, I think one of the things, what I was going to say right before that was that I don't know if it's so much the midterms, but definitely the 2020 election, at least it seems to me, that voters will have to make this decision about, you know, how much can they tolerate and what do they value. So if they're with you,
look, I wish the president, if I were president, I would be making a tour around the country talking only about the economy and are you better off than you were 3 or 4 years ago. That's not how this president argues. I would argue somewhat differently. I don't think we're only talking about this because of the president tweets. I mean, the president has been under siege since he entered office. The anonymous article, I think, is part of this. And he obviously responds in kind. But look, people talk about, we just had a big lecture on civility during the McCain funeral, and then the week after we have the Kavanaugh hearings. I know Brett Kavanaugh. I worked with him. He's a decent man. It was a clown show.
Right, and he'll go and be confirmed because that's where the number. And you and I talked about this a number of times, Bill, before it happened.